Hi, Dr. Amy. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, Meg, thank you for having me.
Well, I am excited to talk all things thyroid today, but before we get into that, could you give us just a little bit of background of who you are, how you got to where you are today?
Absolutely. So, like many of us in this space, it's a pain to purpose journey. So we go through things that are gifted to us, we'll say, health wise, that then we learn from, and then we can bring it to the masses and help other people. So my journey started 20 plus years ago. I used to compete in NPC figure competition. So for the listeners that don't know what that is, it's kind of like a female, more feminine bodybuilding, right? So you are stepping on stage, you're in a bikini, you're being judged. You don't have to be big and bulky. I mean, now it's kind of changed a little bit to more big and bulky, but when I did it, it was just a nice feminine athletic look. But you had to get ready for it. You had to contest prep, you had to show prep. So you had to diet down per se. And and I had done this multiple times. I had done photo shoots I dieted down for. I'd done other shows I dieted down for. It's like a 12-week process. The chicken, the broccoli, the asparagus. You're at the gym twice a day. And it just worked every time. Yeah, you tweak some things here and there, but most of the time it worked. Well, this one show I'm getting ready for, the scale is going up. And I mean 25 plus pounds up. I don't mean just a couple pounds. 25 extra pounds went on the scale while I was doing chicken and broccoli and asparagus and fish and going to the gym twice a day. So biologically, that didn't even make sense. It doesn't even make sense. Like the body should not lay down extra body fat when you're doing all of those things. So I did what we all do. I went to my doctor and I said, hey, this is what's going on. We need to figure this out. So they ran some tests. And believe me, Meg, I would love to go back and know. I mean, I kind of know what tests they ran and didn't run, but I guarantee you it wasn't the full panel that we do now. So they ran a couple tests and they tell me, you're normal. Everything's fine. Well, I don't accept that. Type A crazy drivers, we just keep pushing. We're like, no, we're going to find an answer. So I kept going. And 6 doctors later, and I mean, I heard the medical gaslighting phrases of it's all in your head. I heard eat less and exercise more. I kept hearing you're normal, quote unquote. Everything is fine. You're normal. And meanwhile, I'm sitting there on my little 5'2" frame, 25 extra pounds, and the scale kept going up. I just stopped getting on it after a while because I didn't want to get more depressed than I already was. And I heard all of this from all these doctors, and you really get to a place, and if any of your listeners are here, you're going to understand it. You get to a place where you're so deeply depressed and in this despair mode. Like I remember putting my head on the steering wheel and praying to God that there could be a diagnosis. And honestly, at that point, I didn't care what that diagnosis was. Even if it was severe, it would at least give me an answer as to why my body was literally rebelling against me. So the 7th doctor finally diagnoses me and says, you have hypothyroidism. I didn't get the Hashimoto's diagnosis yet. I just got, you have hypothyroidism. Okay, cool. So I left the office thinking, awesome, there's a pill. There's a name for what's going on. And there's a pill that I now have that's going to fix me, right? Mm-hmm. 5 months later, no weight loss at all. And I didn't even mention the fact that I was fatigued and my hair was falling out. I didn't really even care about that. I cared about the extra weight that kept piling on. So I take this pill. I give it a chance. 5 months later, nothing happens. So I start doing my own research, my big gateway computer at the time, start doing my own research. And there's this thing called T3. And I was given Synthroid T4, which is standard of care. Again, if your listeners are hearing this and they have a thyroid problem, they're nodding right now going, yeah, I'm on T4. Yep, I'm on Levo. I'm on Synthroid. I'm on T4 only. And it's not doing anything either. How about that, right? So T4 is completely inactive. And I'm reading this and I'm like, oh, there's this T3 hormone that's active. And that's what gives you a metabolism. And that's what fixes your symptoms. So I go back to her, I go, hey, how about this? She goes, I don't do that. I go, oh, okay, well, I'm going to find somebody who does. And I kept hearing the name of a functional practitioner. Back then we call them integrative. Mm-hmm. And I kept hearing this name over and over again. So finally I'm like, okay, universe, thank you, God, I'm going to go. So I go and I see this man who became my mentor. did everything with me that I now do with patients. Lab work in front of us, combing through it, putting the pieces of the puzzle together, drawing lines from here to here. This is why this is happening. And this is what we have to do. And this is the supplement that you need. And this is the medication that you need. And this is the diet we got to put you on. I mean, it was just so comprehensive. And he literally gave me my life back. So that was the really like the kick in the pants that I needed to change careers, because I knew the frustration that I had gone through. Oh my God, how many more other women were going through the same thing and not getting answers and giving up at doctor number 2, doctor number 4, accepting that it's all in their head, accepting that maybe they could do something more, diet harder, go to the gym 3 times a day, which is ridiculous. So that's what brought me into this space, is my own pain to purpose journey.
Yes, well, that is great to hear and great to have you be able to relate to people, because I feel like I was in that same spot too, where you're getting no, I think so many of us, you're like you're saying, there's pain and purpose to get here, because when you're hurt here, there's nothing wrong. You have no issues and you feel terrible. It's defeating, and you feel like, okay, I can't get the answers, and maybe it's in my head, and maybe there's nothing I can do. And
Mm-hmm.
thyroid is a place where in the conventional space is really mismanaged. It is, and people one are never getting the right lab work, and then like you said, they're being just really given a synthetic T4, and there's a lot of room to feel better that I think people don't even realize that they have. Either you're diagnosed with the hypothyroid and you're not getting better because you're not getting the right treatment, or you're told so often that you're fine. And
Right.
that's, yeah. So let's dive a little bit into that like thyroid must do's lab for labs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, must do. So standard of care, when you go to your doc and you say, hey, you know what? I heard this chick on a podcast and she's talking about her thyroid. I want a full thyroid panel too.
Yeah.
They're going to do TSH and free T4. That's standard of care. But that literally tells us nothing. So I have a Facebook group. It's called Girl Fix Your Thyroid. People are in there posting their labs all the time. At least 4 out of all the 5 labs that are posted are TSH and free T4, to which I tell the person, okay, this doesn't tell us anything. You have to go back and you have to get free T3, reverse T3, and the TPO and TGA antibodies. That's the key right there, is to look at those markers. I actually don't even care about TSH and free T4. So when we're looking at free T3, so I mentioned earlier that T3 is the active thyroid hormone. The free T3 marker tells us how much of that active thyroid hormone is in your body right now, ready to be taken up by the cell. And that free bioavailable form is more important than the total. And again, a lot of times I'll see people post their total T3. I go, okay, now go back and get the free T3, because we want to see how that matches up and how much of that active thyroid hormone is in your body ready to be used. Then we move on and we check reverse T3, which is the anti-thyroid hormone. So I want you to think of reverse T3 as the bouncer at the club. He is outside of your cell door, literally arms crossed, telling T3 that can't get in. So you could have all the free T3, that beautiful, beautiful markers. We want it in the upper quadrant of the range. That could be perfect. And then we go over here, and if that reverse T3 is above a 12. Now I'm giving you the optimal ranges now too, so you can write these down. If reverse T3 is above a 12, there's a conversion issue. And now you have too many bouncers outside of your cell doors, literally not allowing that T3 molecule, that T3 hormone, to come and attach at the receptor site of the cell. So that alone is going to produce symptoms. And the only thing that converts to reverse T3 is T4, that beautiful pill that I was given by the doctor. T4 only. All of that T4 did nothing for me but convert over to reverse T3 and block the action of T3 at the cell level, which is why I continued to gain weight, didn't lose a pound, still felt like garbage. So we want to test that. That's imperative. Then we move on to TPO and TGA antibodies. Those are the markers for Hashimoto's. That tells us if you have an autoimmune condition where your body is literally attacking your thyroid gland because it thinks it's an invader. Now, of all the hypothyroid cases, and we can give stats, it's something like 16 million and this is just what's diagnosed, that basically double that goes undiagnosed. 16 million Americans have hypothyroidism. Of that, 90 to 95% is Hashimoto's, because it's very, very rare that we see just the thyroid crap the bed. Okay, yeah, if you have an eating disorder, over exercising, under eating, chemotherapy, radiation, certain drugs, even birth control can shut down the thyroid's production of T4 and T3, where literally the thyroid gland just craps the bed. But most of the time it is Hashimoto's. It's the autoimmune form where your body's attacking your own thyroid gland because it thinks it's a bad guy. So we want to check those two markers to make sure. And those markers, since I'm giving out the optimal ranges anyways, we want to see them at 0. So this is what cracks me up. Like, we'll have a person come in, we'll see their labs. And I said, well, were you diagnosed Hashimoto's? They go, no, my doctor told me I don't have Hashimoto's. Well, we're looking at those antibodies. Let's just say take TPO. And the lab range is less than 34. And I just saw this the other day. And the person is coming in at a 28. But they're being told that they don't have Hashimoto's. It's like, well, okay, are we going to wait until you hit that 35 marker for your antibody number after you gain another 10 pounds and can't get out of bed in the morning and you lose 5 more clumps of hair? Then we're going to diagnose you with Hashimoto's. It's like, if you have antibodies on those tests, those are soldiers that are attacking your thyroid. Those are antibodies that are attacking your thyroid. If you want to wait until you actually get that little H next to it, go ahead. But that to me is Hashimoto's.
Mm-hmm. I remember a person that I was working with in particular that it had been asking for about 15 years for her doctor to test her antibodies and was getting refused every time. And she was, listening to things like us talking and trying to educate herself, and was just getting like he was refusing, or different practitioners were refusing. And we finally ran the antibodies. I'm like, you have Hashimoto's. You're not, and
Right.
it gives you the answers and then the different approach to handle it, because it's different when you have the autoimmune. Look, do you want to get a little bit into the difference?
So here's the thing. You're still going to be treated the same way in general. If you're working with me, you're definitely going to be treated the same way, because my goal is to reduce your symptoms and optimize your thyroid hormones. So I want to pair up where I want to see your labs with the reduction of your symptoms, because pretty labs don't matter if you're over here telling me, yeah, like I'm still gaining weight, my hair's still falling out, I'm still constipated, all that. So we need to find what your optimal is. We have functional medicine optimal ranges that we go by. So in general, I know if you're rolling in with a free T3 of a 2.5, you're going to have a ton of symptoms, right? But if you roll in with a free T3 of a 3.5, you may or may not have symptoms. So we have to kind of pair that up with you as a person. Then beyond that, so that's where we want to really optimize you. Then beyond that, if there's Hashimoto's present, then we can obviously implement a gluten-free diet. Now, I say that as if it's common knowledge, but I have to kind of remind myself that it's not common knowledge. So I'm going to say it again with backing. If you have an autoimmune condition, if you know you have Hashimoto's or any other autoimmune condition, I don't care if it's psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, you have to go gluten-free. And why it's even more important for Hashimoto's is because the gluten molecule has this molecular mimicry about it, meaning it looks like the thyroid gland. So to your body that already thinks the thyroid gland is an invader and a bad guy, every time you eat gluten, troops get rallied, right? It's like, hey, there's another invader coming in. Let's go out and attack it. And then it's going to move over. The troops are going to move over and attack your thyroid too. So we want to be gluten-free. That's just across the board. Beyond that, we can use things like black cumin seed oil, low-dose naltrexone, things that will reduce the total amount of antibodies while you're doing the lifestyle changes as well. While we are optimizing your thyroid hormones at the same time, we can implement different protocols for those who have Hashimoto's.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And another hormone that isn't really talked about is the T2. So it's almost like the forgotten thyroid hormone. Could you give us a little bit of that and how that plays a role?
Absolutely. So the reason why it's forgotten, there's no test for it.
Mm-hmm.
So we test free T3, we mentioned that. We test free T4, we mentioned that. There's no absolute test unless it's done in a study situation, which there's been multiple positive, beautiful studies on T2 where they did test for it. And the interesting thing is you can even test for it in pregnancy. And we see during times of pregnancy, it's low. And I'll tell you why. So T2 is one of the 4 thyroid hormones that your thyroid gland produces. T1 really doesn't matter at all, is completely inactive. And remember, even T4 is inactive. T4 will convert over to T3, but in and of itself, T4 is an inactive thyroid hormone. T2 is fascinating because it's active, but it doesn't operate in, let's say, increasing your cardiovascular output. So when we give you T3, it's very, very active. You can get an elevated heart rate. You can get elevated body temperature. You can get elevated pulse and blood pressure. T2 does not have that same effect. It's literally working at the mitochondrial level to improve ATP production and increase basal metabolic rate. Why that's so important is because 9 out of 10 sufferers of hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, deal with the weight gain because the thyroid gland literally controls your metabolism. So when the metabolism is down, your basal metabolic rate, the amount of fat that you are burning at rest with no exercise, no movement, that's very, very low. And then even when you try to stack on, like I did, you try to stack on proper diet, you try to stack on exercise. Again, if you have no metabolism, it doesn't matter what kind of diet or exercise regimen you do, you're not going to see results or experience results because that basal metabolic rate is so low. So T2 can come in and actually increase your basal metabolic rate, helping that person taking it to burn more fat at rest. And then when it's improving mitochondrial function, you're getting that energy component because another big, I would say top 3 symptom of hypothyroidism is fatigue. And it's that fatigue where the person just can't get going during the day. They're staring at the couch at 2 p.m. going, oh man, that looks really good. I wonder if I can just stop work for a while and go take a nap. You have no motivation or zest for life or energy to get through your day. So when we improve mitochondrial function, we improve ATP production, then all of a sudden people are reporting like, hey, I cleaned my house like for the first time in 2 months, right? I actually cleaned my house and went to the grocery store. Like that's a win for a lot of people. And then it starts to build upon that. And then you experience more regular, steady energy through the day. So those 2, we'll say symptoms, the big symptoms of hypothyroidism can be addressed with T2. Now, T2 is in NDT medication, but it's in a tiny amount. So let's say you're listening to this and you're on Armour Thyroid and you're on 60 milligrams of Armour. You're only getting approximately 6 to maybe 8 or 9 micrograms of T2. It's a very, very small amount. So when we're looking at the studies, we have to be really taking in 150 to 300 micrograms. So you can see the really vast difference. You would have to be on a ton of NDT medication to get to that level. But the good thing is we can supplement with it. So we have to be taking 150 to 300 micrograms to really get that basal metabolic rate increase. Where one study looking at, it was done on humans. So we actually have human data. The participants lost 4% body fat in 28 days. Now, again, not 4 pounds, 4% body fat, which is huge. I mean, that's huge. I don't even know what that equates in pound wise because it's going to be different for every person depending on where they start. But that's a 4% decrease in body fat in a very short amount of time. So we really want to be using that therapeutic dose when we are looking at making improvements with T2. The other really cool thing about it, it doesn't change your thyroid lab values. So let's say we're working together. I give you some T3. We get you optimized, right? And then you go back to your PCP and he or she happens to take a look at your thyroid labs. Well, they're not going to be happy because that T3 is going to probably raise your free T3 up into that upper quadrant of the range, maybe over. And guess what it's going to do to your TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, that standard lab value that every doc tests? It's going to suppress it. And because that TSH is going to go low, your doctor is going to call you hyper. And you're going to be sitting there going, I'm hyper.
Yeah, I
I've
feel
only lost like
great.
5 pounds. I'm not
Yeah.
jittery. I'm not anxious. I'm not sweating. I'm not
Mhm.
hyper at all, but they're going to look at that TSH and it's going to be low. T2 will not push down your TSH. So you're not going to get that chatter from your PCP that you're all of a sudden hyper. You're not going to look that way. So that's the other benefit of it. I mean, listen, I still love my T3. I use that with my patients to optimize them, but T2 is so beautiful in that anybody can use it to increase their basal metabolic rate and improve their energy.
That's great. I think you're gonna have a whole bunch of people running out to get that T2. 'Cause-
Yeah. So I ended up, because of the research that I've done, I've been looking into this for 15 years now.
Mhm.
I've been using it on the side with my patients in different forms, still that 3,5-diethyl-L-threonine T2 form, but manufactured by other companies. I've been using it for 15 years and I have seen a multitude of results, which is why, yeah, I ended up manufacturing it myself, which is Thyroid Fixer. So it's part of my Fixer supplement line because it's so vital. It does so much for everyone. And we get questions, can I take this if I don't have a thyroid problem? Well, yeah, if you're battling weight and that scale ain't budging and you're making the lifestyle changes that Meg talks about on here and you're doing all the things, maybe that's the one key component that you can add in that will finally push you to the desired result that really you deserve, especially if you are busting your butt and doing all the things. And then if you are on T4 only, if you're on NDT, I mean, if you're on any kind of thyroid medication, you're like, this isn't doing anything like I was,
Mhm.
then you can add this in to push that progress, to actually see some results, bang for your buck, especially when you're doing all the lifestyle things.
Yes.
So yeah, I think it's just, it still fascinates me to this day to dive into more and more of the studies that there's not enough done on, but even to look at the anecdotal evidence that I see from my listeners and my patients and the reports that I hear back, it's pretty cool.
Wow. And we'll link all of that and there's a coupon, I believe, in the show note. We'll get all of that in the show notes for you too. So anyone that's interested can go right to the show notes to look at that. So, and then let's switch gears a little bit and talk about testosterone because I know that's also an important hormone when we are talking about thyroid for women.
Definitely. So testosterone is often seen as the male hormone, but in reality, especially in menopausal women, we have more testosterone as compared to estrogen and progesterone. So it's our dominant hormone, especially in menopause. We just have less of it than guys. So we tend to, I mean, especially conventional medicine tends to forget that women have and need testosterone. Now, when you're looking at testosterone, the benefits are tremendous. Yes, we get the increased fat burn. We obviously get the increased muscle. And no, you're not going to look like a bodybuilder. If you need testosterone and you replace it the right way,
Mhm.
you're not going to get big and bulky, ladies. Not at all. But it will give you that sexy, lean look, where you're at the gym, you're doing shoulders, right? And you're like, ooh, I see that little cap happening right there, right? And your waist comes in, your legs look better, and your butt looks better. That muscle requires testosterone to grow. I mean, in addition to protein, which Meg talks about on here, you need adequate amounts of testosterone for fat burning and muscle building and strength. But beyond that, it gives you motivation. It gives you drive. It protects your bones. It helps you grow healthy, thick hair. Because if you are testosterone deficient, you may have thinning or falling out hair. Now, we can also see that with testosterone excess, like in polycystic ovarian syndrome. But in the perimenopausal, menopausal population, it's usually due to low testosterone, low estrogen, and poor thyroid function. So we have the hair component. It strengthens your bones. A lot of people don't know that. It has cardiovascular protection benefits, and it has autoimmune protection benefits. So the reason why, ladies, we see more Hashimoto's in the female population is because guys have more testosterone, and that is very protective against autoimmune conditions. That's also why we see something like Parkinson's, which is an autoimmune condition, come on later in life. It's because those testosterone levels are dropping in guys, and that's when they're being diagnosed. They're not being diagnosed at the age of 20. I mean, you might have a random one-off, but the majority of Parkinson's disease in males diagnosed later in life after testosterone levels fall. So it's very, very protective against autoimmunity as well. So it can actually, it's one of those components like we were talking about earlier, what can we do for Hashimoto's? It's one of those components that we also look at because thyroid function will improve when we get your testosterone levels into that optimal range. Now, real quick on that topic of optimal ranges, your lab value cuts off before you even hit optimal. So if you're getting flagged high in your testosterone levels, good for you.
Yeah.
That probably
Yes.
means that you're closer to optimal than you think.
Uh-huh.
So no need to freak out because that most standard lab values for total testosterone, this is what I'm talking about, the total, not the free. Total testosterone will cut off at 48. I bare bones minimum for my ladies is 50 in the total. And then we have to go down and look at the free production and make sure that there's enough free testosterone available for the cells as well. Same with males. But yeah, I mean, you get cut off
Mhm.
before you even hit optimal with total testosterone.
That's saying a lot, right? I mean, when we're looking at
I know.
labs, it's like we have some ranges that are so huge and we need to be in this tiny range to feel good. And then we have some ranges where we're not, like you're saying, optimal's not even in the range, which
Not even there.
can be so confusing, I think, for when you're looking at all of this. When you're dealing and you feel bad and you're not getting answers, it's so thank you so much for clarifying this. The other thing a lot of people will see, it's very common, is insulin resistance. So
Mhm.
can we jump in a little bit to insulin resistance and how that's affecting thyroid?
Yeah, so insulin is a hormone as well. And we have to remember we have to think of it as like a Jekyll and Hyde hormone. We need it for survival because if you're a type 1 diabetic, you have to take insulin because your pancreas no longer produces enough of it. So we need insulin for survival. It works to lower our blood glucose levels, but too much insulin or insulin resistance where it can't get into the cell to do its job, that becomes a problem because it is a fat storage hormone. It likes to push fat into fat. I mean,
Yeah.
it just builds our fat
Yeah.
stores, right? Like it
Mhm.
just it builds them up. So we want that perfect balance of insulin. Now, the thyroid is, as the master gland, will have a direct effect on our insulin secretion. So and our level of insulin sensitivity. So when you're looking at a fasting insulin marker on your labs, you want that below a 6. Yeah, it goes all the way up to like 20, 25 maybe. You want it below a 6. And if it's above a 6 and you know that you're becoming insulin resistant or you are insulin resistant. Now, maybe that might require you optimizing your thyroid, might require you dropping some of the carbohydrates. It might require you adding in some berberine to balance out that insulin resistance. Or or all three, right? To really get the most bang for your buck. But the bottom line is that high insulin level, like I always say, the fastest way to age, keep your insulin up
Yeah.
because you are going to bring on such inflammation in your body. That excess insulin is so inflammatory that, again, your thyroid can't work well because it's in just this ball of inflammation body. You're going to gain weight. You're going to become a type 2 diabetic eventually. And then all the other diseases of inflammation come along with that, including Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is now called type 3 diabetes. I have it very, very strong in my family. My mother passed from it. Her father passed from it. So you bet your ass that I'm going to be watching my insulin levels and checking what I put into my mouth because we know with epigenetics that I can avoid that genetic pass down if I do the right things. And because we now know that Alzheimer's and the plaque buildup in the brain is so connected to high insulin levels, that is one thing that I can do to keep my insulin levels low throughout life so that I can avoid that plaque buildup that I might be genetically predisposed to.
Absolutely. And I think like what you're saying is, I think even clarifying, we check blood glucose in our regular labs and you're not even really getting an insulin. So I'm always also telling people, you need to ask for your insulin to be checked because insulin will go up before your blood glucose because your insulins were like overloaded, working in order to maintain that blood glucose for a while.
Right.
So we're in this watch and wait of the blood glucose and not even checking the insulin. So and that's another
Exactly.
one to ask for is say, can you check my insulin levels too? That's so important. So,
Definitely.
I mean, yes. And then let's talk a little bit because there's always an adrenal component when we're talking about thyroid. So I have heard you say healing your adrenals won't cut it. We talk a lot, unfortunately, now about stress and adrenals and really working on that too. But if you could talk a little bit about your opinion in relation to the thyroid.
So with the adrenals with cortisol, there's a correlation. So T3 needs cortisol, cortisol needs T3. So let's say you're a person whose adrenals have totally crapped the bed, you're flatline, bottom out low, you're not even producing enough of your own cortisol. That is going to affect how any kind of thyroid therapy works on you, because we don't want you walking around with low cortisol production. We don't want you walking around with high cortisol all day long. Boom, boom, boom. These high cortisol markers all day, that's going to push up your blood glucose as well. And it's going to create a state of inflammation. However, I have looked at so many salivary cortisol panels, especially from the individuals that say, I think I'm adrenal deficient. I think I have adrenal fatigue. My adrenals are blown out. And I look and I'm like, no, they're not. They're in perfect alignment. Yeah, maybe this one marker at 5 p.m. when you're driving home from work and you got to like greet the kids and do Johnny's homework and make dinner. You got a little spike right there. But in general, it's that perfect half bell curve. The only times I really see adrenals blown out, like flatline low, flatline high, is after a very traumatic stress. Now, hey, it might be up in the last couple of years, but in general, all the years I've been practicing, I've really only seen those situations. Like for instance, one patient who got divorced and lost her son in a drunk driving accident all in the same year. Yeah, her adrenals took a huge traumatic hit, and we had to nurture them back to life. But in general, most of the time, just some support, like using a nice adrenal glandular just to give some love to your adrenals. So they're like, yeah, I can work all right. Or maybe, if you have that little spike when you're driving home or right before bed, hey, let's use some phosphatidylserine or different things to just nurture the adrenals and lower that one point at a time. But in general, what drives me crazy, Meg, are the practitioners out there that they think healing the adrenals is the answer to the world.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you got a thyroid problem? You got low T3? We're just going to heal your adrenals.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you can't lose it. We're just going to heal your adrenals. And I go, oh, for God's
Yeah.
sake, there's so much more to this, right? You're not
Mm-hmm.
even looking at the fact that the person has no metabolism. They have
Mm-hmm.
no thyroid production. They have no sex hormone production. They're headed into perimenopause. And you're just going to heal their adrenals?
Yeah.
No, it's not going to work. So
Mhm.
again, it just has to be done with some common sense, and it has to be done in correlation with addressing the other things that we see.
Absolutely. And I think you're saying exactly what you look at the whole picture of the person. You say, like, okay, who is this person and what are they experiencing? And that's where you really need to put all of those pieces together rather than just pick out what you're focusing on one thing.
Exactly.
Yes. Well,
Exactly.
thank you so much. You have given us such helpful information. I think that everybody's going to be like, giving, I'm going to stop that again. Just cut that. I'm sorry. Like, I just lost it. Okay. Well, thank you so much. You've given everyone such helpful information. Can you just tell our listeners where they can find you?
Absolutely. So general website, dramyhorneman.com. If you want to get that thyroid fixer that we talked about, you can go to fixersubs.com, FIXXR. And then you can find me on the Thyroid Fixer podcast, where I give a ton of free content. You can learn more about the thyroid than you ever wanted to learn about on there. And then you can join my Facebook group that I talked about earlier, the Girl Fix Your Thyroid Facebook group. It is a private group, but I'm in there every day. You can post your labs, you can post questions, you can really ask me and ask the community who's been there, done that, kind of what direction should I go? And we'll flat out tell you, there are a couple rules. If your doctor says no to testing, it's time to get a new doctor, right? If we see some patterns in there where your doctor is blowing you off and there's obvious low T3, then we tell you that. So we can absolutely guide you in that way too, with thyroid and hormones.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Meg.